Today I would like to discuss and or review texture with you. Texture is one of your 7 elements of art along with line, shape, color, value, form, and space. The definition of texture as we look at it in art class is the way something feels or looks as though it would feel. So if it is an actual texture, like a true piece of wood with when you rub your fingers across it, you feel the wood grain texture. But in art, we often use what's called implied texture, meaning that when you rub your hand across this, you know it's just a sheet of paper, so it feels smooth. But the illusion of texture is there because of the different value changes and sketch marks. And so when we try to create the illusion of texture in our artwork, we want to combine those two things. I want you to think about a basic overall value to begin with. So for instance, in this wood grain example, probably kind of a medium gray is a good base. And then we'll work on adding sketch marks over top of that to create the actual illusion of the grain of the wood. So when you're adding your shading, just like when you are shading and you're shading booklet or objects, you kind of want to think about the direction that your pencil marks should go. In this case, having horizontal pencil marks will help to emphasize that wood grain texture that we have going on. So I'm just going side to side, putting down a medium gray value to begin. I am going to be working really fast so that I don't kill a whole lot of your time that you could be working in, but you still get the gist of it. And I hope that this is dark enough to show in the video. So I have a good base value. If your base value were smooth, it would be totally appropriate to try and create a smoother effect with either your pencil or a blending tool. On this one, wood grain is rough, so a natural rough texture is okay. So to review our sketch marks, the 3 basic sketch marks that we've discussed so far have been hatches, which are lines that don't cross, cross hatches, which are lines that do cross, and stipples, which are neat dots. So in this case, we probably want a whole lot of hatch marks, maybe a few cross hatches, and possibly even an occasional stipple. So looking at the picture, I've got some really deep, dark hatch marks that kind of go off into this shape, making a semicircle around that knot in the wood. A lot of value control will be important while you're working to create texture. But like I said, to give you just a really quick overview, I just kind of want to get some of these basic details in. My goal is that you all will take your time and really practice doing this. It is a difficult task, but the practice, like with any other practice, will make you better at it. So going through, keeping those wood grains going the same direction. If I've got places where the wood grain looks like there's a deeper gap, then I'm going to use a darker mark, a heavier sketch line. Notice up here they tend to get closer together, so my sketch marks, my hatches, should get closer together. So again, there's a quick basic wood grain. Ideally, that would take you at least 10 minutes to try and get the value and the texture correct. With hair, the easiest way that I know to do hair is to begin by sketching in the shapes of the divisions of hair that you see. So I've got this edge where the hair is divided, and then another where it kind of goes across like that. There is a section here where it gets darker. Maybe a little bit of a triangular wedge here, and then another curl that goes across the top, a little dip that comes down. Adding in your shading, think about the direction of your hair growth. Curved lines create form. Straight lines will show the direction that the hair grows in. So your shading itself also creates the illusion of hair, in addition to that combination with sketch marks. So again, we're looking at hatch marks for this one because hair is essentially lines. So I'm going to go through with my hatch marks and start emphasizing some of the dark shadowed areas, using lines as hatch marks to create more texture. You don't have to draw every single hair. It looks almost better if you don't sometimes. Get that dark area shaded in, but think about the direction of the hair growth. There are a few visible dark areas there. There's a highlight along this edge, so I'm going to leave that lighter and add in some dark hatch marks underneath to create that shadow that makes the hair look like it's folded over or curled. You can also go back with an eraser and pull out some of the highlights to really make it look three-dimensional, to make it look like the light is shining on it. And then maybe go back over and add a few more hatch marks to re-emphasize the texture of the hair. Fabric, same concepts, sketch in your shapes, and then go back with your pencil and add in the shading. The one thing that I would say about fabric that really makes or break whether it looks realistic is the transitions between values. So you've got a really dark area here and a light area here. There is no hard line that defines the difference between the two. So definitely remember to blend and have your shading go from light to dark or dark to light smoothly, gradually, no defined edges to show where one begins and one ends. So you would just keep that concept going. On the back we have sand to begin with, and again, same concept. You may want to do scumbles for your shading to already start that texture. Think about where your dark areas are and your light areas. It's almost like a backwards S type shape there that has an edge showing that there's darker on one side. And it is also darker on the left side. Smooth transition from one value to the next. And then for sand, your best bet is probably stipples to create the illusion of individual grains of sand combined together. For your leaf, this one is a little trickier because the veins of the leaf are white and a lot of students want to make them black. But I want you to draw what you see. So what I would suggest is doing an imprint technique. So what I have is some papers that I'm just going to stick underneath. Doesn't matter what they are. I'm just putting something there so that we have some padding so that when we do the imprint technique that it presses into the paper. I'm going to lay a piece of scrap paper with nothing on it, side down, over top of that box. And I'm going to press really firmly, drawing in the veins of the leaves. And again, I'm really just doing a quick overview of this so that you have an idea of how to do it yourself. This area is a little wider, so I'm going to press firmly and make that area darker with my ink pen. And again, you would have all these little tiny veins that are white, that are left white with the pencil. So then when you go over it with that medium value, where you use those incised marks remains white. The leaf has a really smooth texture, so you may want to go back with your pencil and overlap to create the illusion of smoothness, or use a blending stump and do that. And again, you're going through and kind of refining the edges around the veins so that they remain white. The leaf does obviously have some shadows, so you'll need to go back and darken some. And if you used an overall medium value, you may need to go back and erase some of the highlights as well. Just remember that if it is smooth, gradual shading, that you want to match that in your reproduction. For the tree bark, again, you're starting with your shapes. They don't have to look exactly like the picture. You're aiming for a reproduction of tree bark that is realistic. So these look as though they kind of overlap. And the catch with the tree bark is that you kind of think of each of these as being individual three-dimensional shapes. So for instance, this little edge here has, or this little chunk here has an edge that goes in. It's really loose. And then I'm going to lightly go over top of that. And then you may want to combine a few hatch marks or stipples to create a little more texture to it. So the bark is just individual chunks of tree bark. It is one that's a little bit tougher, but If you think about it as being simple shapes that are organic or natural so that they don't have to look absolutely the exact same as they do in the picture, I think you'll find this one goes a little more smoothly. And then lastly, rock, kind of the same concept as the bark. It's a natural organic form, so it doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to match, and it can still be right. I would put on my value first by shading with my pencil turned on its side and scumbling in loose circles to create that medium gray value, medium to light gray. And then go back and look for my dark areas. The shading on something like a rock can be contrasting. It can have sharp edges. So I add in the shading first, and then I kind of go back and add in some hatches and cross hatches and some stipples to make the rock edge look jagged and irregular. And again, just like with all the others, you can go back and erase in highlights if you need to. Remember that light defines the three-dimensionality of an object. There are highlights, there are core values, there are cast shadows and core shadows. So along this edge where the rock curves under and the light's coming from above, you're going to have some shading there. Each of these marks is really a shadow. So you're going to use value to emphasize that. And I think that's the main thing that students tend to leave off when they're working with texture, is that they tend to just put sketch marks and draw in and then maybe color dark, but they don't think about value as a way of creating form. And all of these belong to objects that are three-dimensional. So we all want to hang on to that form and make sure that when we create our textures that we're combining both value, using that shading, and sketch marks. So hatches, cross hatches, and stipples. Thank you.